Is this a weird angle? I don't know. We're gonna try. Well, hey friends, it has been a really long time, and I feel like I start every video like that, yeah, because it's been a few months since I've made any videos. I guess if you're new here and you don't know who I am, my name is Birdie, and I am an artist and designer and potter living in Sweden. And so last year, I quit my day job to become an independent full-time artist. And it was a really interesting year. A lot happened, and this video is basically going to be a 2022 recap, month by month, of how it went. The funny thing is that I have actually filmed content, at least for the first 6 months of 2022. I just didn't ever get around to editing it because I didn't feel inspired or that motivated to edit all that video content. It was a lot, but I think this will be like the opportunity to kind of show the little bits of 2022 that I never got to share with you before. So let's start with January. So January is probably the least exciting month. It was when I was still working my day job. So if you didn't know, I was working as a senior UX designer for a games company. A lot of my day-to-day work was doing user research, doing surveys, looking at our game, making designs, making improvements. And it sounds really exciting until you realize that more than 50% of that time is sitting in meetings, usually listening to men talking a lot. It was a moment for me to, think about what I wanted to do. And I had already been thinking about quitting my full-time job before, but I wasn't really ready to make that change yet. And I have another video here which talks about why I decided to finally leave. Basically, I was still working my day job in January, but I did put in my 1 month notice. And so that's when February hit. February was a very exciting and scary time for me. It's when I left my 10-year career in games. I had been working in games for 10 years, and I had finally kind of reached my limit, I guess my quarter life crisis, and decided I wanted to do something else. This was the month that was happening, and before I knew it, I was out of a job. Now, I had been doing my art business kind of like on the side, and I hate saying on the side because I was spending 30 to 40 hours a week on this other side job, but I had already something backed up. I had a plan, kind of. And I had my art business, which was the thing I wanted to try really growing and making my full-time job in the 2022 year. At the end of February, I wrapped everything up with my previous job, handed it off, and I was then on my own. At the time, I was still working in my previous collective studio. If you've seen any of my previous videos, they are all in a collective art studio that I used to work at. And this is actually the very first video I have ever filmed in here, aside for like one small Patreon video I made ages ago where I did like a really mini studio tour, but this is like the real first video in the studio. And I almost made this video at home, but I thought it'd be like more exciting to do it here. We'll do a studio tour in another video. January, February, not so exciting. March is kind of when things started to get interesting. March. So you would think that quitting your job and pursuing your dreams would be this really, really like life-changing and like exciting moment, right? But it wasn't for me. It was a really, really hard month for me. March was the month where I flopped between going back to my previous job that I knew and deciding whether or not I was going to, really pursue this art business full time. The thing is, I had already quit my job. So I had already decided that doing the full-time job, art business, starving artist, independent person, whatever, chasing my dreams was what I was going to do. The thing is though, is that no one really tells you what that's like to leave behind the person that you were for the past 10 years to suddenly do something different. And I kind of want to touch on that in another video of what that was really like, because I don't want to make this video way too long, but I can tell you that it was really, really hard for me. I wish I could have been like those other artists I've seen who quit their full-time jobs, was super happy, found sudden success, all the things, the glory. But for me, it was kind of like an existential crisis. Like I had lost the identity of who I was before. I was an artist, I was a designer in the mobile games industry. I'd been doing entertainment games for 10 years, and then suddenly I didn't do that anymore. And it was really weird when I would meet new people and they would say like, oh, like, what do you do? And I would say, yeah. In my head, I was like, what do I do now? I mean, I still had my art business, and I don't really know if you could tell from the outside, but I was really struggling on the inside through March. I think I was kind of super depressed, to be honest. I was not really productive. I was eating a ton. I gained a lot of weight. I was going through a thing. So March was really hard, but you know, life goes on. And then April rolled around. April was the month where I started to try to figure out a plan for the year. It was kind of thinking long-term how I was really going to be doing this art business thing. And at the time, as I mentioned, I was still working in the art collective. I was working with all these other artists, and it was a really nice environment. But at the time, I remember thinking that if I was going to be doing this full time, there would be a point where I would have to leave the safety of this art collective and move into my own studio, because I would need more space and I would need eventually my own kiln. So I started to think about like, okay, long term, maybe like in a year, I'm gonna try to get my own art studio. I was thinking like, okay, I'm gonna just start looking now casually and then kind of see what happens. So studio was kind of like on the back burner, not really in my mind. I was like, a year out from now, when I have more experience, that's when I'm gonna officially move into a new studio. That was my thought in April. So the other thing I was also preparing for in April was my first market of the year. I got the opportunity to sell at Met Milan for their spring market, and that was like my first big event as an independent full-time artist. I'm happy to say that the market was really successful and it went really well. We got really lucky with the weather, at least on the first day. It was sunny, tons of people came out. So if you live in Mama and came out to say hi, thank you for coming to my very first market of the year. A lot of what I was doing in April was just like planning for this market that I decided to do, and also figure out what I was doing with myself as an artist and creative and business person. If you can't tell, April was also kind of just like rolling with it, and the good thing was that having the market gave me like a really clear goal of what I was doing. And then May rolled around. May was another one of the months where I was kind of just like, okay, I'm gonna take this month to figure out what I'm gonna do next. But I received an email at the start of May for an invitation to join the Mama Garden Show. And it was extremely last minute because the garden show was, I think, was at the very beginning of June, and I got this email and invitation at the beginning of May. So I ended up with 3 weeks to prepare for the next market, and it was pretty stressful. The good thing was that I had already been designing garden and spring stuff for my previous market at Met Milan. So I had inventory, I had actually stuff ready. But the thing was that this garden show was going to be one of the biggest shows and markets I had ever attended, aside from the Christmas market I had done the year before. However, this would be like a summer market. This one only happens every 2 years in the city, and it was going to be for like a whole new audience. Yeah, it was crazy. And it was also the biggest one I'd ever done, because not only would it just be a booth, it was going to be an entire tent. And I remember thinking like, I don't know how I'm gonna produce enough stuff for this. And so I got really lucky, and I had asked Milky Bond, who's also Swedish, to come join me for the market show. And together it was way more comfortable to have the two of us sharing the tent. I think this was the very last vlog that I had actually filmed, was the preparations for this market and all of the things I would make. And I believe that in that like 1 month period between when I got the invitation to when the market show actually happened, I think I threw over 100 pieces. It was the most work I had ever done, but I felt pressure to show up and do my very best. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention in May, I got an email back from one of the places I had reached out to saying like, hey, you do have this other place that's not listed. Maybe it's interesting to you. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll take a look at it. We went out, met the person to do the real estate tour, and it was perfect. The space that I am in now is the one that we saw. And I remember when she opened the doors, let us in, it needed a lot of work. The floors were all concrete. There were huge cracks in the floor. There were spiders everywhere, but it was big. It was in a nice location. Yeah, it ended up being perfect. So I remember thinking like, oh gosh, like I wasn't ready for getting my own studio. It wasn't in the plans, but I'm not gonna find a better place than this or have a better opportunity. And so I signed a contract, a 3-year contract for an art studio way before I was ready. I didn't think this was gonna happen for another year. I didn't know how I was gonna do the budgeting. I didn't know how I was gonna do my financing. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that this was the opportunity that I was given, and yeah, I wasn't going to find anything better than this. So I signed that contract. So that was really exciting and unexpected, and I wasn't gonna get the keys for another 3 months, so I was gonna let my future self figure that out. Because the thing I had to worry about now was the garden show, and that was like the #1 priority. I think you can kind of see this theme of the pressure I was putting on myself to achieve these things and the expectations I was putting upon myself as being an independent artist for the very first time. And I think, like, needless to say, I burned out. I didn't edit anything for the rest of the year. It was just that it was a lot. June was also a doozy. It was like the entire year. I think that was like basically kind of it for June. I remember I finished the garden show. We got really, really lucky again with the weather. It was beautiful, it was sunny, it didn't rain. Like, anytime it doesn't rain in Malmö, I'm pretty happy. Actually, it was so sunny that I got like a sun rash from being in the sun on that weekend, and then I had to stay inside for a week, which is pretty sad, but that's just how I am now. I'm allergic to the sun. So then July came around, and July was a very exciting month for me, just like on a personal level, because I got to travel finally for the first time in 3 years. After I had wrapped up the garden show, took a break, kind of was like figuring stuff out for my business stuff again, I had to like officially go on holiday. And it was actually kind of stressful to go on holiday when I knew I had all these things to do, because the other thing with being an independent artist is you don't get like paid sick days or paid like vacation days, because you're your own boss. So the money that I made from the garden show was supposed to hold me over for like the gap that I wouldn't be selling through July. And I made this as a very conscious decision actually. I knew that I wouldn't be making income in the month of July, that I was taking time off. I actually took a lot of time off. I did this trip in Scotland and Ireland with my friends. It was amazing. I filmed part of it too. I was gonna make a Scotland and Ireland trip. I had the footage. I took it on the tours. I was filming in the bars. I was there. And then I never edited it. I think it got to the point actually on that trip that I was like, being a travel vlogger is very romantic. I really love the idea of being a travel vlogger. Problem is that when you're doing a travel vlog, you're basically working. I was spending my time filming our stuff from like cool angles. I wanted to be respectful of certain places. So there's also places that you can't film, right? We did this tour and you're not allowed to bring cameras in there. Even though I had all this footage from that trip, it felt really scattered. It wasn't like a story. It just felt like, oh, here guys, here's a pretty flower, or here's what we're eating. And maybe you like that, but it was really difficult for me to manage like enjoying the trip while also like trying to make content. And so actually after the footage I took from there, I decided that when I was gonna do my California trip, I wasn't going to film. It was a very like, I'm gonna enjoy my time back home with my family and I'm not gonna film. So after the Ireland and Scotland trip ended, it was like 2 days at home and then we went straight to California. And this is the first time I had traveled in like 3 years. And it was really exciting to like finally go home and like eat all the good food. We went camping. It was great. It was a lot of fun. So I was doing like some work days here and there because I had to like order samples for stuff. I was preparing like the stickers that I was going to be making for my patrons. I was preparing, yeah, like the autumn and holiday releases. I did do a small meetup in like Southern California, super last minute. Thank you to the 2 people who came out, Na and Rachel. That was actually at the very end of the trip. That meetup was right before I went back to Sweden, and by then it was August. Got back from the States in early August, and then it was time to be a full-time artist. I remember thinking like, I'm gonna try to get the studio set up as fast as I can so that I can get it into a working condition. There were a lot of renovations and I spent a lot of money and a lot of time trying to fix it up to a working state. And it was like a minimum working state to prepare myself for September when I had to start producing ceramics. Basically the 2 things I needed to start working. So I had kiln and I had the wheel. I didn't have any chairs. I had no tables. I was wedging clay on the floor. I had, I think, a shelf to put stuff on at least. So that was pretty cool. But we were like in the minimum working state. I did eventually get a table. My partner made this amazing giant working table for me. It comes on wheels and roll it around. So then I at least had like a high table to work on, but I still had to wedge clay on the floor because I couldn't wedge on like the high working table. It just wasn't possible. September, I was in full production mode. I was on my own for the very first time as a ceramic artist. Previously, I had, you know, the comfort and the skill and expertise of all the other people around me. And for the first time, I was doing this all on my own. I had to set up the kiln on my own. I read a lot of manuals. I read a lot. I read a lot of instructions. And I was so nervous to do my very first firings, because glaze firing is like when all the things can go wrong. Like maybe your glaze is off, maybe like something, I don't know, explodes, like something melts too much. Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong during the glaze firing phase. So I was really nervous. I couldn't put it off anymore. I had to make stuff. So I put my stuff in, Turned it on and waited, and I waited, and I waited. More than 24 hours for the kiln to reach top temperature. It should have only taken 9 hours for it to get to top temperature, and it took 24. So I knew something was wrong. Long story short, I forgot to plug something in, and that's why it took so long to heat up. What ended up happening is that my stuff ended up being overfired, and it was awful. Colors on my pieces ran, things were coming off. It was horrible. I cried. I was so worried that something was gonna go wrong, and then something did go wrong, and it was just like a spectacular failure for the stupidest reason of me not plugging in one of the things correctly. So there were 2 plugs in the kiln that needed to be connected. Only one of them was connected, so the kiln was only using half of its energy to fire, which is what caused it to take so long to reach top temperature and just like poop itself. That was my September, and I remember being totally devastated, and I don't think I did anything for an entire week. But the thing is with time doesn't wait for anyone. So after being really, really upset for a week, I had to pick myself up and keep going. I am happy to say that every firing after that was totally fine after I fixed the problem. I'm happy that the problem was easy to fix. I'm really upset thinking about the fact that the first one was such a spectacular failure on my part. I had like 40 pieces or something like that just completely ruined. But lesson learned, I'll never do it again. And at least if we start from the bottom, we can only, keep going up. So let's do the worst, most horrible things first and then keep going. So that's basically what I did. I ended up making a ton more pieces to make up for the ones that did get messed up. And I am happy to say that there was a successful shop update, at least I think in October, with all the mushroom mugs. So I am really happy that that worked out. So that's basically how September went. Did a lot of renovations, had to completely stop renovations to prepare for the holidays and the kiln fail. But that's when we enter October. And October is like the start of the really, really busy season. And I had some delays on my merchandise, so some of the things came a little bit later, but this is when I was getting all of like my autumn stuff. So I had like autumn notepads, autumn pins, autumn stickers and things like that. They were all coming in October, and this is when I was trying to like share it on social media, while at the same time also making a lot of pottery. I kind of had this system of, okay, in the mornings I do admin, and then in the afternoons I basically throw pottery, and then the evenings were like other art and design things I had to catch up on. So that was basically the cycle of things. My shop was also open at the time, and I was also packing orders. And I remember like this time period was like also really stressful because I was still in the process of moving everything from my home into the art studio. I had my inventory split between 2 locations, and it was pretty difficult at the time actually to pack orders because yeah, half my stuff was here and half my stuff was at home. October came and went also. I'm happy to say it was a pretty good October actually, despite like some of the delays and stuff. I had like the shop update and all the autumn inventory. Then November came, and then November was the busiest month I've ever had in my life. November was the holiday push. I mentioned like things were delayed, and one of the biggest things that was delayed were my socks. I took a really, really big risk and invested a lot in socks. I don't know why I did this, but my past self was like, socks are gonna be the thing. I'm gonna do socks. And I remember November came and the socks were delayed, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna end up with over 1,000 socks and I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. So I was really stressed out about this like inventory that hadn't arrived yet and that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to sell. And I remember in November when they finally came, I shared them on social media. And this is actually when I started to get into Twitter, and I got really lucky in that one of my socks posts basically just kind of went like mini viral. All of a sudden I was getting tons and tons of orders for the socks I made and for the other inventory I made, as well as attention for the final shop update of the year for the ceramics. And so November just ended up being crazy busy. I don't know how it happened. I think it was just, honestly, I think it was just sheer luck. We ended up with over 500 orders in a single month. And like, I look back on it fondly, but I remember at the time being really, really stressed out about it because I'm a small business. And by small business, I mean a business of one. I don't have any employees except for an accountant who helps me out here and there. And then my boyfriend who volunteers to help me when he has time. But this month when I got the 500 orders, there was no way I was able to pack all of those things myself. I had to ask my boyfriend to come help me pack orders because there was there was no way it was gonna happen alone. I am happy to say that together we were able to like basically blast through everything. We also ended up moving all the inventory finally here into the studio, and that made it way easier to pack. The final shop update of the year for the ceramics went really, really well as well. Everything sold out. I think it was the biggest online shop update I've ever done. So while at the garden show I made over 100 pieces for the garden show, I think for this final shop update it was 95 pieces. It was the biggest collection I had done to date. November was crazy, crazy busy. I remember thinking in the summer when I was taking my holiday, because I was taking my holiday in July, that my autumn was gonna be crazy busy. Like I knew this, I was prepared, but you can only prepare so much, and it ended up just being way more than I ever expected in November. And I'm super, super thankful for everyone who had ordered through November and helped me get that like final holiday push out, because November is the last month that my online shop is open, because in December is when I usually close it to focus on local markets. And so when November was done and I closed my shop, I had 1 week then to prepare for my local markets in December. December was then the last final push for the shop. It was like the last events of the year, but it was also the most number of events I had to prepare for, because I had a total of 9 market days planned for December. I don't know why my past self does this, but like I have these ambitions. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do all these things. And then my current self at the time is like, why did you do that? And so basically what ended up happening is my past self was like, what we're gonna do this year, we're gonna do lots of markets in December. Lots of markets. So right after November was done, I had to prepare for these Christmas markets. So preparations involved things like making sure I had enough inventory. So through November, I had also been preparing things for Christmas and like trying to figure out like all my kiln firing schedules and stuff like that to make sure I had enough inventory. And then also getting things like if I needed any decorations for the booth, because I really wanted the booth to look nice, ordering banners, making sure I had a nice table set up. There were a lot of like preparation things that actually went into the Christmas markets in December. So I was working a lot actually. I was preparing inventory during the day, doing my kiln firings at night, trying to throw stuff and paint stuff and glaze stuff, and yeah, it was madness in December. At the end of those Christmas markets, I was dead every single day. I was working from 11 to like 6, working these booths at this Christmas market. 7 hours doesn't sound like much, but it was a lot. It was also cold. It was the coldest it had ever been in Malmo for like the past 10 years. I think it was -13. It was chilly. December was crazy. But I really enjoy doing local markets. For me, it's really nice because in December, because I closed my online shop, December having these local markets means I can make some kind of income at the same time. And then I'll have to worry about like shipping delays and stuff like that, because as any small business owner knows, it gets really stressful at the end of November and the start of December when people are ordering and then asking where their orders are. For me, I have always closed my shop in December to avoid that. Previously, it was never a problem for me because I was working full time and I wasn't depending on my art business for income in December. But because I was working full time now, having these local markets was really important to me, and that's why I signed up for so many. And honestly, I will probably do the same this year as well. I might even do 3 weekends. I'm not sure yet. Don't hold me to that. But I am happy to say that the Christmas markets were really, really successful. We had tons of people come out, lots of people who came by to say hello. And it was really cool because a lot of people who came recognized us from the garden show. People know me as like a local artist, which is super weird. Someone walked by and was like, oh, I loved your YouTube videos. I was like, oh, thanks. And it's like really weird for me to think about that like people see me on the YouTubes, which is funny because I'm making a YouTube video now, but like, it's like weird. One thing I forgot to mention from December is the launch of my very first plushie. I had actually been designing a plushie in collaboration with Makeshift since the end of summer or so, and December was when the crowdfund actually got launched. And I remember it was crazy stressful because at the time I was so busy with the Christmas markets, I didn't really have time to talk much about the launch of the plushie campaign, to the point where I actually wasn't sure if we were gonna get it launched at all. I felt like a personal obligation to make sure that it got made. So I spent a lot of time in like 2 weeks at the end of the campaign, basically campaigning for the plushie. And I want to apologize for marketing it so hard at that time, but I really, really wanted as many people as possible to see the plushie. And honestly, I can't even take credit for the success of it because I really believe it was you who made it happen. Everybody who shared it with their guinea pig lovers, their guinea pig friends, people who love plushies. Somehow we ended up fully funding the campaign and also going beyond as well. It was a really exciting thing for me because I'd always wanted to make a plushie and it was finally happening. And so like, that's how December ended. So that was 2022. As you can see, it was pretty crazy. A lot of falling forward, doing a lot of things I wasn't really ready for, like last minute markets and signing a contract for an art studio that I didn't think I was gonna have for another year. I had to figure a lot of things out on my own, like how to do studio renovations, how to do my own kiln firings, all of the things. It was like an all unknown space that I had to figure out. So I'm really hoping that 2023 will just be a smoother year. I'm really looking forward to getting the studio space fixed. There will be a studio vlog video tour of my studio. I know a lot of you have been asking for it. The patrons saw when my studio was kind of empty when I like first got it. I'm gonna do like a proper studio tour, even if the place is a mess. You're gonna get to see it in all its messy glory. I'm really looking forward actually to showing you what it's like here, because the reality is running your own small business isn't, you know, all rainbows and sunshine. There's a lot of responsibility and just mess that most people don't want to show, but I'm gonna show you it. It's gonna be very exciting. I don't really know what's gonna happen in 2023. I'm still working out what my goals are. I have some ideas, but yeah, I'm not really sure yet. The one thing I do know is that I want to start getting back to YouTube regularly and seeing you. Hope you enjoyed seeing the 2022 recap. If you have any questions, let me know as always. But I guess I just want to say thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care, and yeah, see you later. This is the view I had when I was filming and whenever I was referencing the mess. This is what I was looking at. So hopefully I can get some of this cleaned up before the studio tour, but if it's not done, it's not done.